most common styles or categories for sans serif fonts. And sans serif fonts are different than serifs in that the serifs were a mimicking of the best writing of the time, and they first came in intended for books and pamphlets and other sort of long blocks of written text. Uh, Grotesques, when they come in for a very different purpose. They come in for advertising. And the first, sans serif rather, were the grotesques. And these were often made not out of metal because they were often, at poster sizes, big sizes. They were often made out of wood, and they were cut out of a kind of wood called boxwood and out of the grain, and that ensured that they were very tough and very strong and could go through many, many trips through a press and still continue to print. And they were often a little bit idiosyncratic, and it's not like nobody ever wrote without adding serifs before these came in, but these were the first times that sans serifs came in as printable type. And the first ones looked a lot, or some of them anyway, looked a bit like this one. This is a modern version of a wood font called Knockout. And that's one I've used quite a bit. Accident Grotesque actually has grotesque in the name. You'll see grotesque spelled a little bit differently sometimes with some of these fonts. And then Franklin, I used to use that one quite a bit. And of course, the most famous sans serif in the world is probably Helvetica. And that, along with Universe, are sometimes referred to as neo-grotesques. They're a little bit more streamlined and a little bit less idiosyncratic than the earlier or original grotesque fonts. But even so, all of these have things like a vestigial serif on the A, and that's not uncommon with grotesque fonts. So as then, and here's some sort of early examples of wood print type. These were largely advertising fonts, and they were carved on the wood, and the wood was exactly the same size as the metal type so that they could be printed together. And you can see some examples of little type being printed on the same form with big type. And this is, of course, a DC local go-go poster on the right. New York Subway, which uses Helvetica. Target uses Helvetica for their logo. I don't know what that is, but these are all different versions of grotesque and neo-grotesque fonts. Some of them a little bit artificially squeezed, which most typographers will tell you you should not do, but you do see that all the time in these sort of uses. And then, of course, American Apparel. Also Helvetica. Now, the second one is a geometric sanses. And these sanses are very precise. They look almost like they were drawn with a compass and ruler and T-square. All the lines are perfectly straight. And this is one of the earliest of these. This is Futura at the top and a lighter weight of Avant-Garde at the bottom. And if you remember me mentioning making fonts for Phototypositor in the earlier film, and I talked about Avant-Garde being one of the fonts that was made for Typositor because you can, if you have the basic printing equipment or pre-press equipment, you could make a Typositor reel and you could have your own font. And I'll show you another example, different weight of Avant-Garde in a moment. So these conveyed a sense of modernness at one time, and here's some more Avant-Garde. Avant-Garde was actually designed for Avant-Garde magazine, which this is. Avant-Garde was a square magazine. And Avant-Garde originally did not have a lowercase. That was added later. But it did have all these what are called ligatures and special characters that are designed to print together and be used together. And I don't know if we have, we do have a ligature here. You can see the way the N forms half of the T, and then this A forms the other half of the T. So that had to be made as an individual character for for this font. Now, this just might be a double exposure. When you photographed it with it, when you use a fellow typositor, it was like basically a little dark room, and you kept the chemicals flowing and you kept the media moving, but you could stop it wherever you want, and you could do an overexposure like that too if you wanted to. And that is Futura, I believe, in the Volkswagen ad. A couple other posters. They're just a little bit more regular than the grotesques. There's, as with serif fonts, a lot of fonts sort of straddle a couple of categories in practice. And then there's modular fonts. And modular, when it comes to font design, means something different than it means when it comes to page design. But the way I like to think of modular fonts is they are like a typeface that is snapped together from pieces. And I have a book that actually lays out methods for creating these little pieces and creating a font that fits together. So in other words, this curve here is exactly the same curve and unit as this one there. These two are just sort of snapped on, and a shadow of that curve fills in here. Maybe not literally every time, but generally. Or the D in the curve is exactly the same as the O in the curve. And I guess it's fair to say that every typeface is a little bit modular. In fact, a modern type design program even allows you to create a library of serifs or pieces that you know you'll come to again and again. But modular fonts, the modular is the aesthetic. And I would say these are used that if you want a contemporary look now, a modular font or a modular-esque font is a pretty good way to go. These are both fairly old ones. This is a font called I'm going to blank on the name, but it was the font also used on the original Starship Enterprise. Eurostyle, that's it. And this is Bauhaus. That's also a fairly early modular font. But some of them feel a lot more contemporary and give you a very kind of contemporary look, as in with this product shot and this poster. And then finally, I think this is my final, we have Humanist sans. And if you remember in the earlier lecture, I said that old style fonts are sometimes referred to as Humanist fonts. And Humanist sans are the companions for those. I think Humanist sans often, I don't always use them as my sans text font, but I think they often are the easiest to use as sans text fonts. And they often blend with text fonts a little bit better. They have similar in X height and similar in feel. To me, the Humanist sans just feel the warmest and the friendliest of the sans serifs. It's not quite as severe as something like that, and it also blends nicely into text for the most part. So where are these used? Here is MacBook, and I would think that they're using it exactly for that friendly, open quality that these fonts tend to have. They're saying, this is a friendly product, and here's our friendly font to talk about it with. This is probably the most famous of the Humanist sans. That is Gill Sans. And I believe everyone has access to that font through Adobe Type. And that is my end.